Ubaid period was the beginning of the urban revolution, the transition from settlements to cities. It was also a cultural revolution that transformed the way people lived their daily lives. It can be compared to the Industrial Revolution that transformed a world of farmers into a world of modern cities. Anthropologists speculate wildly about what could have motivated people to become so inventive and organized so quickly. The Bible very tersely mentions the kingdom of Nimrod in Genesis 10 and the city of Babel in Genesis 11, in contrast to the pastoral lifestyle of Abraham in Genesis 12. The lack of details about city-states in Genesis only reflects God's disdain for the social abuses that resulted from urbanization. Abraham is the hero of Genesis. Cities and kingdoms were the problem. Before I explain the urban revolution and Babel, I need to explain three myths that are deeply entrenched in tradition: that Babylon was Babel, that the ziggurat of Babylon was the Tower of Babel, and that everyone lived in Babel. Archaeologists David Roll and Douglas Petrovich have taken a strong stand on Eridu being Babel, and it's time for Christians to update the traditional story of Babel.
Was the city of Babylon the same as Babel in the Bible? No, it wasn't. That's just a myth that's been passed down by tradition. Babylon has only been excavated since the time of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, which began in 626 BC, the time of King Josiah in the Bible. If anything existed before that, it's beneath the water table and cannot be excavated. There is no evidence that Babylon even existed at the time of Babel. Was the ziggurat of Babylon the Tower of Babel? No, it wasn't. That's just a myth based on what was known at the time. The first ziggurats date from the Akkadian Empire and Ur-3, centuries after Babel. The ziggurat of Babylon, called the Temenanki, was rebuilt by Nabopolassar, but no one knows when it was first built. The Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish, calls the Temenanki the upper ziggurat of the Apsu, and the Apsu was Eridu, not Babylon. Did everyone live at Babel for the first 100 years? No, they didn't. It has just been assumed that the word they in Genesis 11:2 meant everyone. Babel was built in Sumer, which is Shinar in the Bible. Archaeology provides abundant evidence that the Fertile Crescent was populated before Mesopotamia. There is no workable model by which the world was first populated out of Sumer. Another myth-busting fact is that the Tower of Babel was not built to reach heaven. The translators of the King James Bible were careful to print the words "may reach" in italics so that readers would know that they were not in the original Hebrew. The tower was not built to escape another flood. Why would they build at sea level when they could always climb a mountain? Nimrod did not necessarily build Babel, although he was probably there. He was the first king and started his kingdom with Babel and Uruk. The multiplication of languages at Babel was not God's judgment. No one died. God showed mercy on mankind by slowing down the spread of monarchy and globalization that was first attempted at Babel. The city was nicknamed Babel because of the confusion of languages after it was abandoned, so no city could have been named Babel or Babylon while it still existed. You've probably never heard of Eridu. Ur of the Chaldees is more familiar since Abraham came from Ur. When cities first sprang up in Sumer, both Eridu and Uruk were larger and more influential than Ur. All three were on the Euphrates River, no further than 41 miles apart. We will focus on Eridu this week and on Uruk in the next video. This drawing comes from the official but rare book Eridu, published by the Republic of Iraq. It was written in 1982 by excavators Fuad Safar, Muhammad Ali Mustafa, and Seton Lloyd concerning the excavations that took place at Eridu between 1946 and 1949. 6 temples were rebuilt, one on top of the other, as illustrated here. The latest ones were built on a raised platform that became increasingly massive. This is the closest that we can get to a picture of the Tower of Babel. Unfortunately, nothing remains on top of the last 5 platforms. This either reveals that the last temple was unfinished or that it was pillaged to build a ziggurat centuries later. How do we know that Eridu was Babel rather than Babylon? Let me quickly list 14 reasons. First of all, Eridu is recognized by archaeologists as the first and oldest city, where a city is defined as having a population of 5 or 10,000 people. Secondly, Eridu was one of the first settlements, if not the first, that had a community building. This is studied closely by archaeologists. Up to that time, dwelling places were all the same size throughout the settlement. Thirdly, Eridu is listed as the first city in Sumerian literature, such as in the Sumerian king list. 4. Archaeologists also link Eridu to the eastern side of Mesopotamia through their use of irrigation. Chogamami, for example, was on the eastern side of the Tigris River. It had Sumeran pottery below Eridu pottery, and it employed irrigation that was also used at Eridu. Archaeology agrees with the Bible that they came from the east. 5. Eridu is very definitely located on the plain of Sumer, which is the flattest plain anywhere in the Near East. The name Sumer is a cognate of Shinar in the Bible, and the Bible says that Babel was built on the plain of Shinar. 6. Eridu was built of bricks, which is very clearly stated about Babel in Genesis 11:3. This is important because houses in that location at that time were made with reeds from the marshes, not with bricks. 7. Genesis 11:4 says that Babel was a city and a tower. The word for tower is Migdal in Hebrew. This is the first time Migdal is used in the Bible, so it hasn't been defined yet. It generally means something raised or elevated. The last 3 temples at Eridu were built on a raised platform that later evolved into ziggurats. 8. Beginning with Eridu, we see family leadership breaking down and giving over to the rise of the state. 9. Beginning with Eridu, we see equality between people in general and between men and women giving way to classes of rich and poor and the subjugation of women. 10. Beginning with Eridu, we see one culture attempting to become global and replace the cultures of other tribal regions further away. 11. Eridu was abandoned for centuries for no apparent reason other than the confusion of languages mentioned in the Bible. Many settlements were also abandoned across the Near East at about the same time, but Eridu was the only city that was abandoned. 12. Authority was transferred from Eridu to Uruk. This can be inferred from the study of Nimrod in the Bible and the study of Sumerian literature, and it explains where people went afterwards. 13. Eridu was the forerunner, and it became the pattern for Mesopotamian city-states that came later. They all imitated the politics and religion of Eridu. 14. Writing began at Uruk, shortly after people abandoned Eridu. This is what we would expect. When people no longer spoke the same language, they needed tokens and symbolic writing in order to transact business. Eridu was more than just the first city. It was the first movement that aggressively spread its ideas to other regions. The culture of Eridu is called Ubaid, which includes pottery, architecture, and more. The Ubaid culture imposed its influence first on northern Mesopotamia and eventually all the way to the Mediterranean Sea and halfway down the Persian Gulf. It changed the way the world thought, worshiped, and did business. This is enormous. God could have responded by building bigger cities to prove that He's the greatest, but God doesn't work that way. Instead, God chose Abraham, a shepherd, and the head of a family to demonstrate His character and power to Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and Persia in the sight of the whole world. In this video, we looked at Eridu and the Ubaid period. Join us next time in Part 9 when we look at the city of Uruk and the Uruk period. The Ubaid period was an effort to unify the world while it spoke one language. The Uruk period was an effort to keep people together even though they spoke many different languages. Babel is the key to early history.
If you have learned anything about archaeology, then subscribe to this channel to learn more. The playlist Life After the Flood reconstructs a biblical model of life between Noah and Abraham. This is how archaeology works. It uses known facts to create a hypothetical scenario that is open to scrutiny. I have combined conservative hermeneutics with sound archaeology to create a model for biblical paleoarchaeology. You won't find such a clear and detailed study anywhere else. I promise to keep each video short. If you have learned something about the Bible as history and how God walks with mankind, then subscribe to this channel and tell others about it. I'm on a mission to educate everyone about the most ignored, misrepresented, and crucial period of human history. Join me by educating yourself and by telling others about life after the flood.